The warship no one took seriously. The fleet thought it was safe. Then everything changed. The galaxy was old, and humans were new. That was the simple truth that every alien in the Galactic Concord liked to repeat. Humans had only known about aliens for 40 years. 40 years was nothing. The Kael'thari Dominion had been flying between stars for 10,000 years. The Slith hierarchy had built their first warp gate when humans were still living in caves. So when Earth joined the Concord, nobody expected much from it. Humans were placed at the very bottom of the ranking list. Tier 9, the lowest tier there was. Most species in the Concord did not even bother learning about humans. Why would they? Humans had weak ships, small colonies, and old technology. Humans still used chemical rockets less than 100 years ago. To species like the Kael'thari, who had ships that could fold space and weapons that could crack a moon in half, humans were like children playing with sticks. But there was one human ship that some aliens had heard of, not because it was powerful, not because it was elegant. They had heard of it because it was ugly. So ugly that alien pilots would laugh when they saw pictures of it. Its name was the UES Second Chance, and it was the only warship that guarded a small human colony system called New Meridian. The Second Chance did not look like the sleek, curved ships that most alien races built. Kael'thari ships were shaped like blades, smooth and shining, built to look beautiful as well as deadly. Slith ships were shaped like teardrops, silent and graceful. But the Second Chance looked like someone had welded 100 different metal boxes together and hoped for the best. Its hull was covered in thick plates that did not match in color. Some parts were painted gray, some were bare metal, and one whole section near the back was still marked with yellow warning stripes from the shipyard that built it. It had no smooth curves. It had no elegant lines. It looked heavy, slow, and clumsy. Alien inspectors who visited human shipyards had filed reports calling it a flying scrap heap and an insult to modern engineering. One young Kael'thari officer named Threx Vorn had once seen a picture of the Second Chance during a training briefing, and he had laughed so hard that his fellow officers thought he was choking. He kept a printed image of the ship on his wall for years, using it as a joke whenever he wanted to make his crew laugh before a hard day of training. "This," he would say, pointing at the crooked hull and the mismatched armor plates, "is what happens when children try to build a warship." Nobody in the Concord took the Second Chance seriously, and that was exactly how the people who built it wanted things to be. The ship had been built at the Ceres shipyards, deep in the asteroid belt of the human home system. The engineers who designed it were led by a woman named Dr. Amara Chen, a quiet scientist who had spent years studying old Earth military history before humans ever met aliens. She had read about tanks from World War II, about battleships from the era before satellites, about the idea that sometimes the strongest weapon was not the most beautiful one. She believed that alien ships were built to look powerful, but that a lot of their power was wasted on things that did not matter in a real fight. Smooth curves that reduced armor thickness, elegant designs that left weak points, and beautiful engines that could not take a single hard hit without breaking down. Dr. Chen and her team built the Second Chance differently. Every ugly patch of metal on its hull was thick, layered armor made from 3 different materials stacked together, designed to stop different kinds of weapons. The strange yellow warning stripes near the back were not a mistake. They marked the location of something the aliens did not know existed, a weapon system called the Hammer Drive, a short-range cannon so powerful that firing it too many times in a row could shake the whole ship apart if the crew was not careful. The mismatched sections were mismatched on purpose, so that alien sensors scanning the ship from far away could not get a clean reading of what was hidden underneath the outer plates. Most importantly, the ship's true power came from something that had nothing to do with looks at all. It came from redundancy. If one system failed, 3 more were ready to take its place. If one section of the hull was destroyed, the ship could keep fighting with what remained. Alien ships were built to be perfect and elegant, but if their main power core was hit, the whole ship often died in seconds. The Second Chance had 5 separate power cores, each one able to run the ship on its own if the others failed. None of this was visible from the outside. From the outside, it just looked like junk. Captain Elena Voss had been given command of the Second Chance 3 years earlier. She was in her early 40s, with short brown hair that was starting to turn gray at the edges. and eyes that had seen more hard years than most people her age. Before she became a warship captain, she had spent 15 years flying cargo ships between Earth, Mars, and the outer colonies. She knew what it was like to keep an old, tired ship running through a storm when there was no one else to help. She knew that a ship's true strength was not always visible, and that the crew who trusted their ship completely could survive things that looked impossible on paper. When Voss first arrived at Ceres shipyards to take command of the Second Chance, she had walked around the outside of the ship for almost an hour before going inside. Her officers thought she looked disappointed. She was not. She was studying every welded seam, every armor plate, every strange bump and patch on the hull, because she wanted to understand the ship the way a doctor understands a patient's body. By the end of that hour, she had a small smile on her face. "They're going to underestimate us," she said to her first officer, a tall man named Commander Marcus Reyes. "Every single one of them." "Is that a good thing, Captain?" Reyes asked. "It's the best thing that could happen to us," Voss said. New Meridian was a small system, 3 jumps away from Earth, with 2 colonized planets, and about 4 million people living there. It was a peaceful place, mostly farmers and miners, with small trade ships coming and going. It was also close to the edge of Concord territory, near a region of space that the Kael'thari Dominion had been slowly expanding into for the past several years. The Kael'thari were proud, old, and powerful. Their empire stretched across hundreds of star systems, and their military had not lost a real war in over 300 years. They were tall, gray-skinned beings with long limbs and sharp, narrow eyes, and they believed deeply in the idea of strength through order. Weakness, to the Kael'thari, was something to be corrected or removed, not tolerated. They looked at younger species the way an old teacher might look at a foolish student, sometimes with patience, but mostly with impatience, and a desire to teach a lesson. Threx Vorn had risen through the ranks of the Kael'thari military quickly. He was skilled, ambitious, and sure of himself. By the time he was given command of the Dominion's 3rd expansion fleet, he had already earned a reputation as a commander who won battles cleanly and without unnecessary losses. His fleet was made up of 42 warships, including 3 massive dreadnoughts, each one longer than 10 human skyscrapers stacked end to end. For years, the Dominion had watched the edges of human space with quiet interest. Some in the Dominion's high command believed that humans should be left alone, since they posed no threat and controlled resources that were not particularly valuable. But others, including Threx, believed that the Concord's decision to let a weak, primitive species join as an equal member was dangerous. If humans were allowed to remain independent and free, other young, weak species might get the same idea, and the old order of the galaxy might slowly begin to crack. Threx believed that someone needed to remind the galaxy who truly held the power. New Meridian was the perfect place to send that message. It was close to Dominion space, it was lightly defended, and it was guarded by a single ship that every Kael'thari officer already thought was a joke. The plan was simple, at least in Threx's mind. He would take his fleet to New Meridian, demand that the colony accept Dominion oversight, and if the humans refused, he would destroy their one defending warship and take the system by force. It would not even be a real battle. It would be a demonstration, a lesson for the whole Concord to see. Humans were weak, and weak things did not get to keep what belonged to the strong. Before the fleet departed, there was a diplomatic gathering at a neutral space station near the border, a place called Halcyon Station, where representatives from many species met to discuss trade and territory. It was here that Captain Voss and Grand Marshal Threx Vorn met for the first time, though neither of them yet knew what was coming. The gathering was crowded with delegates from a dozen species. Human diplomats from Earth stood near a viewing window, discussing trade routes with a group of Vantor merchants. Captain Voss had been asked to attend as a military representative, since New Meridian's safety was part of the discussion. She wore her formal captain's uniform, dark blue with silver trim, and she stood quietly near the edge of the room, watching more than talking. Threx approached her without an invitation. He was nearly 7 feet tall, and he looked down at her the way one might look at a curious insect. "You are the captain of the ship they call the Second Chance," he said. It was not a question. "That's right," Voss said calmly. "I have seen images of your vessel," Threx said. and a small, cold smile crossed his narrow face. "It is unusual. Your engineers must have run out of proper materials halfway through construction." Several nearby aliens chuckled quietly. Voss did not react with anger. She simply looked up at him with the same calm expression she always wore. "It flies," she said. "It fights. That's all it needs to do." "A ship is a reflection of the people who built it," Threx said. "An elegant ship comes from an elegant mind. A crude ship comes from a crude one. I wonder what your ship says about your species, Captain." "Maybe it says we don't waste time worrying about how things look," Voss replied. "Maybe it says we care more about what a ship can survive than what it can show off." Threx's smile did not fade, but something in his eyes shifted, just slightly, as if he had not expected such a calm answer. "Bold words for the commander of a single ship, guarding an entire star system," he said. "It's the only ship New Meridian needs," Voss said. Threx laughed, a low, dry sound. "We will see about that," he said, and he walked away without another word. Voss watched him go, and Commander Reyes, who had been standing nearby, walked up to her side. "That was Grand Marshal Threx Vorn," Reyes said quietly. "Word is his fleet has been moving supplies toward the border for the past 2 months." "I know," Voss said, still watching the tall gray figure disappear into the crowd. "I've been reading the same reports you have. Do you think he's planning something against New Meridian?" Voss was quiet for a moment. Outside the station's large viewing window, the stars stretched out in every direction, cold and endless. Somewhere out there, beyond the edge of Concord space, a Kael'thari fleet of 42 warships was gathering, preparing to prove a point that had already been proven wrong many times throughout history. The idea that the strongest-looking thing was always the strongest thing. "I think," Voss said slowly, "that Grand Marshal Threx Vorn is about to learn a very old lesson, the kind of lesson every powerful empire eventually learns, usually too late." "What lesson is that, Captain?" Voss finally turned away from the window and looked at her first officer. "Never judge a warship by its paint job," she said. Back at New Meridian, the Second Chance sat quietly in orbit above the colony's main planet, its lights blinking softly against the darkness of space. To anyone watching from a distance, it looked exactly like what everyone believed it to be. An old, ugly, unimportant ship, hardly worth a second glance. Its crew of 600 men and women went about their daily duties, running drills, checking systems, and waiting. Deep inside the ship, in a section marked with faded yellow warning stripes, the hammer drive sat silent and ready, its true power hidden behind thick armor plates that no alien sensor had ever managed to properly scan. In the ship's 5 separate power cores, energy hummed quietly, patient and steady, like something sleeping but not truly asleep. Nobody in the wider galaxy paid much attention to New Meridian, or its lone defending warship. The Concord's great powers were busy with their own affairs, their own wars, their own politics. Far away, near the border of Dominion territory, 42 warships were preparing to jump toward a small human colony that almost nobody had ever heard of, led by a commander who was completely certain of an easy, one-sided victory. Nobody realized that they were about to sail directly into history. Nobody realized that the galaxy's understanding of humanity and of the ship called the Second Chance was about to change forever. The fleet believed it was safe. The fleet believed the outcome was already decided. They were wrong, and they would learn exactly how wrong very soon. Captain Voss stood on the bridge of her ship that night, looking out at the stars above New Meridian, and though she said nothing to her crew, she already knew, deep in her bones, that something was coming. She had seen the way Threx looked at her. She had seen the pride in his eyes, the certainty that nothing could challenge him. She had met people like that before, long ago, back when she flew cargo ships through dangerous stretches of space, and she knew one simple truth about pride like that. It always came before a very hard fall. "Set the ship to standard patrol readiness," she told Reyes quietly, "and let's make sure every system on this ship is running exactly the way it should be. I have a feeling we're going to need all of them very soon." "Yes, Captain," Reyes said, and he moved to carry out her orders. Outside the viewport, the stars continued to shine, cold and silent. giving no hint of the storm that was gathering just beyond the edge of human space. The second chance waited, patient as ever, hiding its true strength behind a hull that looked like nothing more than scrap metal, welded together by careless hands. The fleet that no one took seriously was about to meet the empire that took nothing seriously at all, until the day it finally would have no choice. 3 weeks after the meeting at Halcyon Station, the Concord Council held an emergency session. Reports had come in from several border monitoring posts that the Kalthari Dominion's third expansion fleet had left its home base and was moving in the direction of human territory. Concord analysts were not certain what the fleet's target was, but New Meridian sat directly along its most likely path, and that was enough to worry the human delegation. The Concord Council was made up of representatives from every member species, and it met inside a massive circular chamber on Concord Prime, the Concord Central Space Station. Human Ambassador David Okafor stood before the council that day, asking for support, asking for other member fleets to send ships to help defend New Meridian. He explained that the colony had only one warship guarding it, and that a fleet of 42 Kalthari vessels, including 3 dreadnoughts, would be able to destroy it easily if war truly came. Most of the council listened politely. A few species, like the Vantor Combine, expressed sympathy, but when it came time to vote on sending help, almost no one was willing to risk their own ships or anger the powerful Kalthari Dominion over what many saw as a small, unimportant human colony. The Slith representative, a quiet being with silver scales who rarely spoke, finally said what many others were thinking. "The Dominion has not declared war," the Slith representative said. "They are simply moving a fleet through space they claim historical rights to. If we send our ships to New Meridian without proof of an attack, we may be the ones who start a war, not the Kalthari. And humanity has one warship. Perhaps that will be enough to make the Dominion reconsider whatever plans they have. Perhaps it will not. Either way, this is not yet a matter for the whole Concord." Ambassador Okafor argued for almost an hour, but in the end, the council voted not to send additional ships. New Meridian would have to depend on the second chance alone, at least for now. Okafor left the chamber angry and worried, and he sent an urgent message back to Earth and to Captain Voss, warning her that no outside help was coming. Voss received the message on the bridge of the second chance, standing beside Commander Reyes as the words appeared on the main screen. She read it twice, then turned to her first officer with a calm expression. "Well," she said, "it looks like it's just us." "That's not exactly comforting news, Captain," Reyes said. "No," Voss agreed, "but it's not surprising either. The Concord has never trusted us completely. As far as most of them are concerned, we're still the new kids, and new kids don't get help until they've proven they're worth helping." She looked around the bridge at her crew, all of them listening quietly. "Which means we're going to have to prove it ourselves." Down in the engineering section of the ship, Dr. Amara Chen had been working almost non-stop since the reports of the Dominion fleet's movement first arrived. She ran diagnostic after diagnostic on the hammer drive, making sure every connection was solid, every power relay was clean, every safety system was ready, in case the weapon needed to fire at full strength. She had built the second chance to be tested one day, but she had always hoped that day would come much later, after more ships like it had been built, after humanity had more time to prepare. That hope was quickly running out. Chen walked through the engine room with a small team of engineers, checking each of the ship's 5 power cores one by one. The cores were arranged in a pattern that no alien engineer would have expected, spread throughout different parts of the ship, instead of grouped together in one place, so that a single hit could never disable the entire power system at once. Each core hummed with a steady, healthy rhythm, like a heartbeat. "How long until the Dominion fleet reaches New Meridian?" one of her engineers, a young man named Priya Patel, asked as they worked. "Concord tracking estimates about 9 days, Chen said, "assuming they don't change course." "Do you think they will attack?" Priya asked. Chen paused, resting a hand on the smooth metal casing of the nearest power core. She thought of Threx Vorn, whose face she had seen in intelligence reports gathered from Concord sources, a proud, confident officer with a long record of victories and almost no record of ever backing down from a fight he believed he could win. "I think," she said slowly, "that a man like that doesn't move 42 warships toward a border just to turn around and go home." Meanwhile, far across the stars, the third expansion fleet continued its slow, steady advance toward human space. Grand Marshal Threx Vorn stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominion warship Ashen Glory, watching the stars slide past the viewport as his fleet moved closer to its target. The Ashen Glory was a massive dreadnought, nearly 4 kilometers long, its hull smooth and dark, covered in glowing blue lines that pulsed gently with energy. It looked exactly like what it was, a masterpiece of Kael'thari engineering, built to be both beautiful and deadly. Threx's second-in-command, a sharp-featured officer named Commander Zeth Caro, approached him quietly. Grand Marshal, scouts report no additional Concord ships have arrived at New Meridian. The system remains defended by the single vessel, the one they call the Second Chance. Good, Threx said. Then this will be quick and clean, exactly as planned. Some in the fleet are calling it an easy victory already, Caro said. Morale is high. Threx allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. As it should be. We are not conquerors here, Commander. We are teachers. We are going to teach the Concord, and every young species watching, a lesson about the true order of this galaxy. Strength rules. Weakness yields. It has always been this way, and it always will be. And if the humans do not yield, Caro asked, then we will destroy their ship, take their colony, and let the lesson be even clearer, Threx said simply. Either way, we win. Before the main fleet arrived, Threx decided to send a small group of scout drones ahead to gather more detailed information about New Meridian's defenses. It was a routine precaution, something any careful commander would do before a major engagement, even one he expected to win easily. 5 drones, fast and nearly silent, slipped through the darkness of space toward the edge of the New Meridian system, their sensors sweeping for any sign of activity. Aboard the Second Chance, the ship's sensor officer, a sharp-eyed young woman named Officer Yuki Tanaka, spotted the drones almost immediately. Captain, I'm reading 5 unidentified contacts entering the outer system. Small profile, high speed. Sensor readings match Kael'thari scout drone signatures. Let them look, Voss said calmly, standing at the center of the bridge. Don't power up any weapons. Don't change our patrol pattern. Just watch them. Captain? Reyes asked, surprised. Shouldn't we intercept them, or at least warn them off? No, Voss said. If we chase them away now, they'll come back with more, and next time, we won't know they're coming. Right now, they think they're being sneaky. Let's let them keep thinking that. We'll learn just as much watching them as they learn watching us. Maybe more. The drones spent several hours scanning the Second Chance from a distance, gathering sensor data on its size, its patrol patterns, and whatever surface details their instruments could pick up. But because of the layered armor plating and the deliberately mismatched hull sections that Dr. Chen's team had designed, the drone's scans came back confused and incomplete. They detected a large, oddly shaped vessel with unusual armor readings, but they could not get a clear picture of its weapon systems, its power output, or its true capabilities. The ship's 5 separate power cores, each one running at only a fraction of its full strength during routine patrol, gave off readings so low and so scattered that the drone's analysis systems classified the ship's overall power rating as low to moderate, well below what a modern warship should have. Satisfied that they had gathered enough information, the drones eventually turned and headed back toward the Dominion fleet, carrying their incomplete data with them. 3 days later, Threx reviewed the scout report personally, standing in his private quarters aboard the Ashen Glory. The data confirmed everything he had already believed. The human ship was large but poorly designed, with weak power output and confused, inconsistent armor construction. There was no sign of any hidden weapon system remotely close to Dominion standards. His analysts estimated that the Second Chance would last, at most, a few minutes against the full weight of his fleet. Just as I expected, Threx said to Caro, tossing the datapad aside. A single ship, poorly built, with no real chance of survival. This will hardly be worth calling a battle. Should we still proceed with full fleet deployment, Grand Marshal? Caro asked. Given the weakness of their defenses, perhaps a smaller strike force would suffice. Threx considered this for a moment, then shook his head. No, I want the full fleet present. I want this to be remembered. I want every species in the Concord to see exactly what happens to those who believe they can stand as equals among us, without earning that right. This is not just about destroying one ship, Commander. It is about sending a message that cannot be misunderstood. And so the third expansion fleet continued forward, unchanged in size, unchanged in confidence, moving steadily toward New Meridian with all 42 ships intact, led by a dreadnought that had never known defeat, commanded by a man who could not imagine losing to a species barely 40 years removed from chemical rockets. Back at New Meridian, Captain Voss called a meeting of her senior officers in the ship's briefing room. Dr. Chen was there, along with Commander Reyes, Officer Tanaka, and several other department heads. A holographic display in the center of the table showed the projected path of the Dominion fleet, now only 6 days away from the system's outer edge. They sent scouts, Voss said, looking around the table, which means they're being careful, even if they don't think they need to be. That tells me two things. First, Threx Vorn is not careless, even if he's arrogant. And second, he's coming with everything he has, because he wants to make a statement, not just win a fight. The scout data they gathered was incomplete, Chen said. Our armor and power distribution confused their sensors, exactly as designed. As far as they know, we're a slow, weak ship with no real surprises left to show. Good, Voss said. Let's make sure that's exactly what they keep believing, right up until the moment it stops mattering. She turned to Reyes. I want every system on this ship checked and rechecked over the next 6 days. I want our crew rested, focused, and ready. And I want a full readiness drill on the hammer drive, at minimum power, just to be absolutely certain everything is functioning perfectly when the time comes. Understood, Captain, Reyes said. What about New Meridian itself? Tanaka asked. The colony has almost no independent defenses. If the fleet gets past us, they won't, Voss said, and there was a quiet, steady certainty in her voice that made everyone at the table look up at her. I know this ship. I know what it can do, and I know what kind of commander sends his entire fleet just to make a point instead of using the smallest force necessary to win. That kind of commander believes his own reputation more than he believes the facts in front of him. That's a weakness, and we're going to use it. Over the following days, the crew of the Second Chance worked tirelessly, preparing every system for the coming fight. Dr. Chen and her engineering team ran the hammer drive through a careful series of tests, firing it at minimum power against a target drone far outside the system to confirm that every safety system functioned correctly. The drone, a small automated target roughly the size of a shuttlecraft, was completely destroyed by a single low-power test shot, vaporized so quickly that the sensors barely registered the moment of impact. And that, Chen said quietly to Priya Patel as they reviewed the test data, was at less than 10% power. Priya stared at the readings for a long moment. What happens at full power? Let's hope we don't have to find out the hard way, Chen said. But if we do, I think Grand Marshal Threx Vorn is going to learn something about human engineering that he will never forget. On the 5th day before the fleet's expected arrival, Captain Voss addressed her entire crew over the ship's internal communication system. Her voice was calm, steady, and clear, carrying through every corridor and every station on the Second Chance. In a few days, a fleet of 42 enemy warships is going to arrive in this system, believing they are about to win an easy victory, she said. They believe our ship is weak. They believe our people are weak. They believe that because we are young among the stars, we have nothing to teach the galaxy about strength, about courage, or about what it truly means to defend what belongs to us. She paused for a moment, letting her words settle across the ship. They are wrong, she continued, and in a few days, we are going to show them exactly how wrong they are. Not with anger, not with cruelty, but with skill, with preparation, and with everything this ship and this crew have trained for. New Meridian is counting on us. Earth is counting on us. And whether the rest of the galaxy realizes it yet or not, they are all about to learn what this ship and this crew are truly capable of. Across the Second Chance, in engine rooms and gun decks, on the bridge and in the corridors, 600 men and women listened to their captain's words, and something steady and quiet settled over the ship. Fear was still there, as it always is before a great battle, but beneath the fear was something stronger, a calm, patient confidence, built not on hope, but on preparation. Far beyond the edge of the system, the third expansion fleet continued its advance. 42 warships moving through the darkness of space, in tight, disciplined formation, led by a proud commander who was already imagining the moment of his easy victory. Neither side yet knew just how different the coming battle would be from what either of them expected. But 6 days from now, in the quiet space above New Meridian, the galaxy's understanding of humanity was finally going to be tested and changed forever. On the 6th day, the third expansion fleet arrived at the edge of the New Meridian system. 42 Kalthari warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in a wide, disciplined formation, their dark hulls glowing faintly, with lines of blue energy against the black of space. At the center of the formation floated the Ashen Glory, the massive flagship dreadnought, nearly 4 kilometers of smooth, deadly metal, flanked by 2 other dreadnoughts almost as large. Around them spread cruisers, destroyers, and dozens of smaller support ships, an overwhelming force built to crush any resistance quickly and completely. Aboard the Second Chance, alarms rang softly through the ship, as sensor readings confirmed what everyone had known was coming. Officer Tanaka's voice carried across the bridge, steady, despite the tension in the room. "Captain, multiple contacts detected at the system's edge. 42 vessels, matching the profile of the Kalthari 3rd Expansion Fleet. They are approximately 3 hours out from New Meridian's inner planets at current speed." Captain Voss stood at the center of the bridge, her hands clasped calmly behind her back. "Bring the ship to full readiness," she said. "All hands to battle stations. Notify New Meridian's colonial government and advise all civilian traffic to move to designated shelter zones immediately." "Yes, Captain," Reyes said, already relaying the orders. Throughout the ship, the calm quiet of routine patrol gave way to the focused energy of a crew preparing for battle. In the engine room, Dr. Chen and her team made final checks on the hammer drive and the 5 power cores, watching every reading carefully. On the gun decks, weapons officers ran through final targeting calibrations. In the corridors, medical teams prepared emergency stations, and damage control crews checked every hatch and bulkhead one last time. Voss walked to the front of the bridge and looked out at the starfield ahead, where, still too far away to see with the naked eye, 42 enemy warships were approaching. She thought of the conversation she'd had with Threx Vorn at Halcyon Station, his cold smile, his certainty. She thought of the scout drones that had come and gone, carrying incomplete, misleading data back to their commander. Everything had been building toward this moment. "Position the ship at the edge of the inner system, along the most direct approach path to New Meridian's primary colony," Voss ordered. "We're not running. We're not hiding. Let them see exactly what they expect to see." The Second Chance moved into position, its mismatched, heavy hull catching the light of the system's distant sun. To any observer, it still looked exactly like the ship the Dominion scouts had reported. Large, strangely built, unimpressive. Behind its thick, layered armor, the truth remained hidden. 2 hours later, the Kalthari fleet crossed into weapons range. Aboard the Ashen Glory, Grand Marshal Threx Vorn stood on his bridge, watching the single human ship on the main display, with something close to amusement. "There it is," he said to Commander Caro. "Exactly where the scouts said it would be. Not even trying to run." "Foolish or brave," Caro said. "Foolish," Threx said without hesitation. "Bravery requires understanding what you're facing and choosing to stand anyway. This is simply a species that does not yet understand what it's facing." He turned to his communications officer. "Open a channel to the human vessel. Let us give them one chance to yield before we begin." The channel opened, and Threx's voice carried across the growing distance between the two fleets, translated instantly into English by Concord Standard Systems. "Captain Voss," he said, his tone almost pleasant, as if speaking to an old acquaintance. "We meet again. Though I imagine you expected different circumstances, I am prepared to offer New Meridian the chance to accept Dominion protection peacefully. Stand your ship down, and no further harm needs to come to your colony." On the bridge of the Second Chance, Voss listened to the message with an unreadable expression. She waited a moment before responding, letting the silence stretch just long enough to be noticed. "Grand Marshal Threx Vorn," she said finally, her voice calm and even. "New Meridian belongs to the people who live there. It's not yours to protect, and it's not yours to take. I'd suggest you turn your fleet around and go home." There was a short pause on the other end of the channel, and when Threx spoke again, his tone had shifted, colder now, the pleasant mask gone. "A single ship, defying 42, he said. "I admire the confidence, Captain. Misplaced as it is. Very well. If you insist on making this difficult, we will simply have to teach the lesson the hard way." The channel closed. "Captain," Reyes said quietly, "they're beginning to spread into attack formation." "Let them," Voss said. "Hold our position. All weapons to stand by, but do not fire until my direct order. I want them fully committed before we show them anything." The Kael'thari fleet spread out across the darkness of space, dozens of ships forming a wide arc designed to surround the lone human vessel from multiple angles at once. It was a textbook formation, one that had worked for the Dominion in hundreds of battles across 3 centuries. Against a single ship with no support, it should have been overwhelming within minutes. The first shots came from a group of 6 Kael'thari cruisers positioned along the fleet's left flank, streams of blue energy weapons lancing across the darkness toward the second chance. Voss watched calmly as the ship's automated defense systems responded, angling the thick, layered armor plating to absorb the incoming fire along its strongest sections. "Direct hits along sections 4 through 7, Tanaka reported. "Armor holding at 94% integrity. No critical damage." A murmur of surprise passed through the Dominion fleet's communication channels, though the humans could not hear it. Several Kael'thari weapons officers had expected the first volley to cause significant damage to a ship their own scans had classified as weakly armored. Instead, the second chance barely seemed to notice the hits. "Return fire," Voss ordered. "Standard weapons only. Target the lead cruisers. Let's remind them we're not entirely defenseless." The second chance's outer weapons batteries, the ones visible to any casual observer, opened fire, sending concentrated energy blasts toward the attacking cruisers. The shots struck true, damaging shields and hull plating on 2 of the 6 ships, forcing them to pull back slightly to reassess. It was a respectable response, strong enough to be taken seriously, but nowhere near enough to suggest anything unusual was happening, exactly as Voss intended. Aboard the Ashen Glory, Threx watched the exchange with a slight frown. "Their armor is stronger than the scout reports suggested," he said. "Still well within acceptable parameters," Caro said. "Their return fire is unremarkable. Standard energy weapons, moderate yield. Nothing to be concerned about." "No," Threx agreed slowly. "Nothing to be concerned about, but something in the back of his mind, some old instinct built from 300 years of Dominion military tradition, whispered a small note of caution that he chose, in his pride, to ignore. Increase the pressure. Bring the second wave in from the flanking positions. Let's end this quickly." More ships joined the attack, spreading fire across the second chance's hull from multiple directions at once. The human ship shuddered under the growing barrage, its armor absorbing hit after hit, though the constant impacts began to take a visible toll. Sparks flew from damaged sections near the ship's outer hull, and small fires flickered briefly in a few exposed compartments before automated systems extinguished them. "Hull integrity down to 81%, Tanaka reported, her voice tightening slightly. "They're targeting our weapons batteries directly, Captain. 3 of our outer guns are offline." "Understood," Voss said, her voice remaining steady despite the mounting damage. "Continue evasive maneuvers. Keep our strongest armor sections facing their heaviest fire." Inside the engine room, Dr. Chen gripped the edge of a control console as the ship shook from another series of impacts. Around her, engineers monitored the 5 power cores carefully, watching for any sign of critical failure. So far, all 5 remained stable, their power output steady despite the chaos outside. "Core 2 is showing minor fluctuations from the last impact," one of her engineers reported. "Nothing critical. Cores 1, 3, 4, and 5 remain fully stable." "Good," Chen said. "That's exactly what they were designed for. Keep monitoring." On the bridge, Reyes glanced at Voss with a hint of concern in his eyes. "Captain, at this rate of damage, we're looking at a difficult next hour, even with our reinforced armor. Should we consider deploying additional defenses?" "Not yet," Voss said. "They need to believe they're winning. They need to be fully committed, every ship close and confident, before we change the situation. If we reveal our full strength too early, some of them might retreat before we can end this properly. I want this fleet to understand, completely and without doubt, what happens to those who threaten what belongs to us." Reyes nodded, though the tension in his jaw remained. "Understood, Captain." The battle continued for nearly 40 minutes, the second chance absorbing wave after wave of Dominion fire while returning enough damage to remain a credible, if apparently struggling, opponent. 2 more Kelthari cruisers pulled back with moderate damage, but the vast majority of the fleet remained untouched, closing in steadily, confident that victory was simply a matter of time. Aboard the Ashen Glory, Threx watched the tactical display with growing satisfaction. The human ship's hull integrity had dropped to 67%. Several of its outer weapons were offline. By any normal measure, the battle was proceeding exactly as predicted, if perhaps taking slightly longer than expected due to the ship's unexpectedly strong armor. "Their weapons fire has become more erratic," Caro observed. "I believe their targeting systems may be sustaining damage." "Send in the assault wing," Threx ordered, a note of finality in his voice. "Let's finish this before the hour is out. I want that ship disabled, not destroyed. I want it towed back to Dominion space as a trophy, a reminder to every human who ever doubts the order of this galaxy." A new formation of Kelthari destroyers broke away from the main fleet, moving into closer range, preparing for what Threx believed would be the final, decisive strike. As they closed the distance, moving into the tight formation required for a concentrated finishing volley, something aboard the Second Chance began to change. On the bridge, Voss watched the destroyer formation approaching on the tactical display, moving exactly where she had hoped they would eventually move, close, clustered together, fully committed, with the majority of the fleet's remaining ships spread out behind them, in a position that left them dangerously exposed to a very specific kind of attack. "Captain," Tanaka said quietly, "the destroyer formation is at optimal range." Voss allowed herself a small, quiet breath, the first sign of tension she had shown throughout the entire engagement. Then it passed, replaced by the same calm certainty she had carried since the moment the Dominion fleet first appeared at the edge of the system. "Dr. Chen," Voss said, opening a direct channel to the engine room. "Status on the hammer drive?" Down in the depths of the ship, standing beside the massive, humming weapon system that no alien sensor had ever properly identified, Dr. Chen checked the final readings one last time. Every safety system was green. Every power core was stable and ready. Weeks and months and years of careful, patient engineering, all of it building toward this single moment. "Hammer drive is fully charged and ready, Captain," Chen said. "Just say the word." On the bridge, Voss looked at the tactical display one final time, watching the proud, confident formation of Kelthari warships closing in around her ship, every one of them still believing, completely and without doubt, that they were about to win an easy, one-sided victory. "All hands," Voss said, her voice carrying clearly across the entire ship's communication system, calm but unmistakably firm. "Brace for full power discharge." She turned back to face the viewport, watching the approaching enemy fleet, and for the first time since the battle began, a small, quiet smile crossed her face. "Dr. Chen," she said, "fire the hammer drive." The hammer drive fired. For the crew of the Second Chance, the moment was almost silent, just a deep, low hum that ran through the entire ship, followed by a slight tremble in the floor and walls, like the ship itself had taken a single deep breath. But outside, in the cold darkness of space, the effect was anything but quiet. A beam of pure, condensed energy tore out from the hidden weapon system beneath the ship's mismatched, yellow-striped armor plates, ripping across the distance between the Second Chance and the tightly clustered formation of Kelthari destroyers in less than a second. The beam did not simply strike one ship. It passed through the first destroyer's hull, as though the thick, advanced armor were made of paper, continued forward, and struck the second ship directly behind it, and then the third. 3 Kelthari destroyers, each one nearly 600 meters long, simply ceased to exist. There was no dramatic explosion, no slow-motion destruction. One moment they were there, proud and confident, closing in for what their commander believed would be an easy finishing strike. The next moment, there was only drifting debris and a rapidly expanding cloud of superheated gas where 3 warships had been. For a long, stunned moment, silence fell across every communication channel in the Kael'thari fleet. Aboard the Ashen Glory, Threx Vorn stared at the tactical display in disbelief, watching 3 green markers, representing 3 of his ships, simply vanish from the screen. "What?" he said slowly, his voice tight with something between confusion and the first cold edge of fear. "Was that?" "Grand Marshal," Caro said, his voice unsteady. "Sensor readings show an energy discharge from the human vessel, unlike anything in our database. Power output." "Grand Marshal, the reading is off our scale. Our systems cannot even properly measure it." "That is not possible," Threx said. "Their scans showed weak power output. Their armor was inconsistent, poorly designed." "Grand Marshal," Caro interrupted, "an unusual thing for him to do, I believe. I believe their entire ship was designed to hide its true capabilities. The armor, the power readings, all of it. I believe we have been looking at exactly what they wanted us to see." On the bridge of the Second Chance, a tense quiet held for just a moment as the crew watched the results of the hammer drive's first full-power discharge. Then Officer Tanaka's voice broke the silence, professional despite the disbelief clearly present underneath it. "Captain, 3 enemy destroyers destroyed. Confirmed. The remaining fleet is... They're breaking formation, Captain. They're pulling back." Voss nodded slowly, watching the chaos spreading across the enemy fleet's positions on the tactical display. "Dr. Chen," she said, opening the channel to engineering again. "Status on the hammer drive after that discharge?" "Power cores holding steady," Chen replied, though there was a slight tremor of excitement in her voice. "Core 2 shows increased strain, but well within safety limits. We can fire again in 90 seconds if needed, Captain." "Good," Voss said. "Let's hope we don't need it again so soon, but let's be ready just in case." Across the Kael'thari fleet, the sudden, devastating loss of 3 destroyers in a single strike sent a wave of confusion and fear rippling through ships that had, only minutes before, been utterly confident of victory. Weapons officers hesitated, pilots broke formation without orders, pulling their ships back to safer distances. The tight, disciplined arc that had surrounded the Second Chance began to fracture, ships scattering as 300 years of unbroken Dominion military tradition collided head-on with something none of them had ever encountered before. Threx felt his hands tighten into fists at his sides as he watched his fleet's formation collapse. "Hold position," he ordered, his voice sharp and commanding, cutting through the rising chaos on the command channel. "All ships, hold position. We still outnumber them nearly 40 to 1. One weapon, however powerful, cannot save a single ship against an entire fleet. Concentrate all remaining firepower on the human vessel immediately." Slowly, reluctantly, the scattered Dominion ships began to regroup, their crews steadying themselves under the weight of their commander's furious orders. It was true, after all. Even a weapon capable of destroying 3 ships in an instant could not fire fast enough or wide enough to stop 39 remaining warships from overwhelming a single vessel through sheer numbers, if they attacked together, all at once, without hesitation. "They're regrouping," Tanaka reported. "All remaining ships converging for a coordinated attack, Captain. They're bringing everything they have." "Let them," Voss said. "Dr. Chen, what's our status?" "Hammer drive ready to fire again in 40 seconds, Chen reported. "That won't be fast enough to stop a full coordinated volley from 39 ships, Reyes said quietly, studying the tactical display. "Captain, if they all fire together." "I know," Voss said. She had known this moment might come from the very beginning, from the first day Dr. Chen's team began designing the Second Chance years earlier. A single powerful weapon could win a battle of surprise, but it could not win a battle of raw numbers alone, not against a fleet still capable of concentrating overwhelming firepower. "Deploy the Deep Six," she ordered. "All fighter wings. Launch immediately." Hidden within specialized bays along the Second Chance's lower hull, sections that alien scans had dismissed as simple cargo storage, 24 small, fast attack fighters launched into space, spreading out around the larger ship in a protective formation. These were the Deep Six squadrons, fighters built using the same principle as the Second Chance itself, unimpressive appearance hiding genuine capability, designed to disrupt enemy formations and draw fire away from more critical targets. The Dominion fleet, already unsettled by the destruction of 3 destroyers, now found itself facing a swarm of unexpected fighters, weaving through their formation, striking at weapons batteries and engine sections with precise, coordinated attacks. What had been planned as a single overwhelming volley against one large target became instead a chaotic, close-range engagement against dozens of smaller, harder-to-hit targets darting between the larger warships. "Concentrate fire on the fighters," Threx shouted, watching his carefully planned finishing strike dissolve into confusion. "Ignore the main vessel for now. Clear the fighters first." But even as Kelthari point defense systems began targeting the swarming human fighters, the delay gave the second chance exactly what it needed. "Hammer drive ready," Chen reported. "Fire," Voss said. The weapon discharged a second time, this beam angled differently, sweeping across a cluster of 4 Kelthari cruisers that had drawn close together while trying to target the Deep Six fighters. All 4 ships were destroyed in an instant, their hulls torn open by energy far beyond anything their shields had been designed to withstand. Panic, real and undeniable, began spreading through the Dominion fleet's communication channels. Pilots who had spent their entire careers within the disciplined, confident structure of Kelthari military tradition found themselves facing something completely outside their experience or training, an enemy that had, without warning, revealed itself to be far more dangerous than anything their scans, their intelligence reports, or their own arrogant assumptions had prepared them for. "Grand Marshal," Caro said, his voice now openly urgent, "we have lost 7 ships in less than 10 minutes. Recommend immediate tactical withdrawal to regroup at a safer distance." "No," Threx said, though even he could hear the strain in his own voice now. "We do not retreat from a single ship, regardless of its capabilities. Bring the remaining dreadnoughts forward, full assault, all weapons, immediately." The Ashen Glory and its 2 sister dreadnoughts, the largest and most powerful ships in the entire fleet, moved forward together, their massive weapons batteries charging with visible energy along their dark hulls. Even after everything that had happened, 3 dreadnoughts together represented a level of firepower that dwarfed anything else in the battle, and Threx was determined to end this engagement with an overwhelming, undeniable show of Dominion strength. Aboard the Second Chance, Voss watched the 3 massive ships approaching and felt, for the first time since the battle began, a genuine flicker of concern. The hammer drive was powerful, but it needed time between shots to avoid damaging the ship's own systems, and 3 dreadnoughts firing together represented more raw destructive power than even her ship's reinforced armor could withstand indefinitely. "Dr. Chen," she said, "how long until the hammer drive is ready again?" 60 more seconds, Captain," Chen said. "I can try to push it faster, but there's risk to Core 2 if we do." "How much risk?" Chen hesitated only briefly. "Manageable. If it saves the ship, I'll push it." "Do it," Voss said. She turned to Reyes. "All remaining weapons, concentrate fire on the lead dreadnought's forward shield generators. Evasive maneuvers, maximum effort. We need to buy 30 seconds." The Second Chance twisted through space with surprising agility for a ship its size, its remaining weapons batteries firing steadily at the approaching dreadnoughts, while its armor absorbed the mounting return fire. The ship shook violently under the combined weight of 3 dreadnoughts' weapons, hull integrity dropping steadily, sparks and small fires breaking out across multiple sections, as damage control teams worked desperately to keep every system functioning. "Hull integrity at 43%, Tanaka reported, tension clear in her voice now. "We're taking heavy damage across sections 9 through 14. "Hold together," Voss said quietly, as much to the ship itself as to her crew. "Just a little longer." "Hammer drive ready," Chen's voice came through, strained but steady. "Core 2, showing significant stress, but stable, Captain." "Fire on the lead dreadnought," Voss ordered immediately. "Full power." The weapon discharged a third time, the beam tearing directly into the Ashen Glory's forward section. Unlike the smaller destroyers and cruisers, the massive dreadnought did not simply vanish. Its powerful shields and thick armor absorbed much of the blast, but the impact was still catastrophic, tearing a massive hole through its forward weapons array and sending the great ship listing sideways, trailing debris and venting atmosphere from a dozen ruptured compartments. Aboard the Ashen Glory, Threx was thrown from his feet as the ship shuddered violently under the impact. Emergency lighting flickered on across the bridge as several primary systems failed. "Damage report!" he shouted, pulling himself back up. "Forward weapons offline," Caro reported, his voice tight with pain as he steadied himself against a console. "Shield generators critically damaged. Grand Marshal, we have lost 60% of our forward combat capability in a single strike." Threx stared at the tactical display, watching the wreckage of 8 destroyed ships drifting silently among the stars, watching his once proud flagship crippled in bleeding atmosphere into space, watching the remaining ships of his fleet scattered and disorganized, their earlier confidence completely shattered. For the first time in his career, Grand Marshal Threx Vorn understood, with sudden and terrible clarity, that he had made a catastrophic mistake. "Grand Marshal," Caro said quietly. "Orders?" Around them, the remaining Dominion ships waited, uncertain, their crews shaken by losses that should have been impossible against a single, supposedly weak human vessel. On the tactical display, the Second Chance continued to hold its position, damaged but still fighting, its outline a battered, ugly shape against the stars, a shape that no longer looked like a joke to anyone who had witnessed what it had just done. Threx closed his eyes for a brief moment, feeling the weight of pride, tradition, and 300 years of unbroken victories pressing down on him, alongside the terrible new understanding that all of it might be about to end here, above a small human colony that almost nobody in the galaxy had ever bothered to learn the name of. When he opened his eyes again, his voice, though still commanding, carried a note that had never been there before. "All remaining ships," he said slowly, "prepare for immediate withdrawal." The order to withdraw spread quickly across the remaining ships of the Third Expansion Fleet. What had begun only an hour earlier, as a confident, overwhelming show of Dominion strength had collapsed into something no Kael'thari commander in 300 years had ever needed to order against a species so young among the stars. A full retreat. Aboard the Second Chance, Officer Tanaka watched the enemy formation break apart on the tactical display, ships turning away and accelerating toward the safety of faster-than-light travel, as quickly as their damaged systems would allow. "Captain," she said, disbelief still coloring her voice even as she reported the good news. "The enemy fleet is withdrawing. All remaining ships, including the flagship, are retreating from the system." A quiet moment passed on the bridge. The kind of stillness that comes after a storm has finally broken. Captain Voss stood at the center of the bridge, her uniform stained with sweat, her face showing the exhaustion of the past hour, but her eyes steady as she watched the wreckage of 8 destroyed enemy ships drift silently among the stars, and the remaining 34 vessels of what had once been a proud, confident fleet retreating in disorder. "Cease fire," Voss said quietly. "Let them go. We've made our point." "Yes, Captain," Reyes said, relaying the order. Across the ship, the crew of the Second Chance began to process what had just happened. In the engine room, Dr. Chen finally allowed herself to sit down for the first time in hours, watching the 5 power cores settle back into their steady, patient rhythm. Core 2 showed significant strain from the rapid successive firings, but it had held. Every system had held. Years of careful, patient design, built by a species that the rest of the galaxy had dismissed as too young and too primitive to matter, had just turned back an entire invasion fleet from an empire 10,000 years old. "We did it," Priya Patel said quietly, staring at the readings in front of her, still hardly able to believe it. "The ship did what it was built to do," Chen said, though there was quiet pride in her voice as well. "It just took the rest of the galaxy a little longer to understand what that meant." News of the battle spread quickly. Concord monitoring stations near the border had detected the engagement almost as soon as it began, and detailed sensor logs, including the destruction of 8 Kael'thari warships and the crippling of the Dominion flagship, reached Concord Prime within days. What followed was nothing short of a sensation across every major news and information network in Concord space. A single human warship, previously mocked and dismissed by nearly every species in the galaxy, had faced a full Dominion expansion fleet of 42 warships and forced it into a humiliating retreat, destroying 8 vessels and severely damaging the flagship, all without losing a single ship of its own. Within the Concord Council chamber, the mood shifted almost overnight. Species that had refused to send aid just weeks earlier now sent formal messages of respect and interest to the human delegation. Ambassador Okafor, who had argued so hard for support and been turned away, suddenly found himself surrounded by representatives eager to discuss deeper cooperation with Earth. The Slith representative, the same quiet being who had argued that New Meridian was not yet a matter for the whole Concord, requested a private meeting with Okafor shortly after the news broke. "We underestimated your people," the Slith said simply. "It seems that is a mistake many are making, and one the Concord should be careful not to repeat." "We didn't ask to be underestimated," Okafor replied. "We just asked for a chance to prove ourselves. It seems Grand Marshal Threx Vorn gave us exactly that chance, whether he meant to or not." Within the Kael'thari Dominion, the news of the Third Expansion Fleet's defeat caused shockwaves that reached the very highest levels of their military and political leadership. 300 years of unbroken victories, 300 years of the Dominion's reputation as an unstoppable force, had been shattered in a single afternoon above a small colony system that almost no one in the Empire had heard of before that day. Grand Marshal Threx Vorn returned to Dominion territory aboard his crippled flagship, the Ashen Glory, limping home under emergency power, carrying the wreckage of his reputation, along with the physical damage to his ship. He was summoned before the Dominion's High Command almost immediately upon arrival, and the meeting that followed was neither quick nor comfortable. "You were given the finest fleet in the Third Sector," one of the High Command elders said coldly, "and you lost 8 ships, along with your flagship's combat capability, to a single vessel from a species you yourself described as children playing with sticks." Threx stood before them, stripped of the confidence and pride that had defined him for his entire career. "I underestimated them," he admitted, the words difficult but necessary. Their ship was designed specifically to be underestimated. Every scan, every report, every piece of intelligence we gathered was, in hindsight, exactly what they wanted us to see. We were not defeated by superior numbers or superior technology alone. We were defeated by patience, by discipline, and by a willingness to hide their true strength until the moment it mattered most. "And what would you have us learn from this failure, Grand Marshal?" the elder asked. Threx was quiet for a long moment before answering. "That the galaxy is larger and stranger than 300 years of victories have taught us to believe," he said finally, "and that a species should never be judged solely by how long it has known the stars, but by what it is capable of when it is finally tested." The High Command stripped Threx of his command of the Third Expansion Fleet, though they did not remove him from military service entirely, recognizing that the lesson he had learned, however costly, might prove valuable in future dealings with the young but clearly dangerous species that had emerged from a small blue world called Earth. Word of the defeat spread throughout Dominion space, and for the first time in living memory, Kael'thari military academies began including a new case study in their training programs, the Battle of New Meridian, an example of the dangers of underestimating an opponent based on appearances alone. Back at New Meridian, the colony held a public ceremony to honor the crew of the Second Chance. Thousands of colonists gathered in the main square of the planet's largest city, watching as Captain Voss and her senior officers stood before them, still wearing the marks of the battle they had just survived. Repairs to the ship were already underway at a temporary dock built in orbit, engineers and workers swarming over the damaged hull sections, patching the very same mismatched armor plates that had fooled an entire Dominion fleet. Voss stood before the crowd, and though she had never enjoyed public speaking, she found the words came easier than she expected. "This ship was never meant to look impressive," she said, her voice carrying across the square through the colony's speaker system. "It was built to survive, to protect, and to do its job when it mattered most, no matter what anyone else thought of it when they looked at it from the outside. I think there's a lesson in that, not just for warships, but for all of us. The galaxy is going to look at humanity for a long time and see something young, something unfinished, something easy to dismiss. Let them look. Let them underestimate us, if that's what they choose to do. Because when the moment comes that truly matters, we will be ready, exactly as this ship and this crew were ready today." The crowd's applause echoed across the square, but Voss's eyes drifted upward, toward the orbit where the Second Chance floated, patient and battle-scarred, still looking, to any casual observer, like nothing more than an ugly, mismatched pile of scrap metal. Weeks later, back on Earth, the Concord Council formally requested a meeting with human representatives to discuss expanding cooperation and support for New Meridian's defenses, along with several other border colonies that had previously been considered too small or unimportant to protect. Ambassador Okafor addressed the same council chamber where he had once argued, largely unsuccessfully, for the help that never came, and this time, every representative in the room listened closely to every word he said. Dr. Amara Chen received quiet private recognition for her role in designing the second chance, along with new funding and support to begin work on a second and third ship built using the same principles: strength hidden beneath an unremarkable appearance, redundancy built into every critical system, and weapons capable of turning the tide of a battle that looked, on the surface, impossibly one-sided. Aboard the repaired second chance, life slowly returned to something resembling its old routine. Patrols resumed, drills continued. The mismatched welded plates along the hull, now patched and repaired in the same deliberately inconsistent style as before, once again gave the ship the appearance of an unimpressive, forgettable vessel, hardly worth a second glance from anyone passing through the system. But something had changed, even if the ship's outward appearance had not. Word of the battle had spread throughout the galaxy, and though the second chance still looked exactly the same as it always had, no one who heard its story ever looked at it quite the same way again. Alien captains passing through Concord space began quietly adjusting their intelligence reports, no longer dismissing unusual human ship designs as evidence of poor engineering, but instead flagging them for closer, more careful study. Standing on the bridge one quiet evening, watching the stars stretch out beyond the viewport, Captain Voss found Commander Reyes beside her, both of them looking out at the same peaceful darkness that had, weeks earlier, been filled with the fire and fury of battle. "Do you think they've learned their lesson?" Reyes asked. "The Dominion, the Concord, all of them?" Voss considered the question for a long moment before answering. "Some of them, maybe," she said. "Others will forget, or convince themselves it was a fluke, a lucky break that won't happen again. That's fine. Let them believe whatever helps them sleep at night. We know the truth. Dr. Chen knows the truth. Every person on this ship knows the truth." "And what's that, Captain?" Voss looked out at the stars, thinking of everything that had happened, everything her crew had survived, everything the galaxy had assumed about humanity, and had now been forced to reconsider. "That being underestimated isn't a weakness," she said. "It's an advantage, if you're smart enough to use it. The galaxy thought this ship was safe to ignore. They thought humanity was safe to ignore. They were wrong, and now they know it." She turned away from the viewport, walking toward the bridge's central chair, ready to begin another quiet patrol above a small colony that, not so long ago, almost nobody in the galaxy had ever bothered to notice. "Set a course for the outer patrol route," she said, "and let's keep this ship looking exactly as ugly and unimportant as it always has. Some secrets are worth keeping." Behind her, the crew of the Second Chance returned to their stations, and the ship moved silently through the darkness of space, carrying its hidden strength beneath a hull that still, to any careless observer, looked like nothing more than scrap metal welded together by careless hands. But the fleet that had once thought it was safe now knew better, and across the wider galaxy, slowly but surely, so did everyone else. The warship no one took seriously had, in the end, made certain that no one ever would again.